Hi students, this is the start of week 7, common pitfalls in direct practice. So chapters 5 and 6 talked about all the things that you should do, the good skills part. Chapter 7 is don't do this. These are the holy grail of pitfalls to try to avoid. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through all 10 pitfalls in this one video, or if I'm going to break it up, so we'll see how the time goes. I'm kind of trying to watch my time. Pitfall number 1 is advice giving. Oh gosh, and a couple of y'all mentioned in your discussion post that you kind of like to give advice, and you give good advice, but don't do that with clients. Just avoid giving advice. The whole idea is that you empower clients to make their own decisions, and hopefully to make better decisions perhaps than they've had in the past, which can be problematic. So different than information giving or giving options, do not give advice. We do not tell clients what to do. Okay, pitfall number 2 is inappropriate use of humor. I'm guilty of this. Sometimes humor can be very, very effective. Laughter can be very effective, or it can be very detrimental. And you need to know when and how and read your client. Sometimes humor can lighten up a situation, but if a client is in distress and really sharing some personal things, then that is not the time to think of something funny to kind of turn it around. Sometimes we use sarcasm, and that's not appropriate or helpful in the helping. So if you tend to be one of these people who kind of always has a little zing, and it's usually regarded as funny in your family and friends, you might need to rein that back in. Let your client guide you to the extent to which humor and laughter comes into play. I've had several students over the years I've supervised that when they're nervous, they giggle, they laugh inappropriately. As a social work intern or a new social worker, you may feel nervous, and so if your tendency is to kind of have that giggle while you are talking, you need to monitor that. I would encourage you to use your iPad or your phone and do some videos like I'm doing, kind of read some cases or do some role plays where actually I'm going to have you do this with people around you. So think about situations that you might find yourself in where you would be using humor or laughter inappropriately. Pitfall number 3 is to not interrupt the client and or make abrupt transitions. Sometimes we need to ask a lot of questions, but as chapter 5 pointed out, the way in which we do it should be in a relational way. The question should flow. You should be listening and responding, and then basing your next question based on that. You don't need to rush it through. Some agencies have some real time restrictions, and so it's important. You want to think, I've got to get all this information, I've got to ask all these questions, but you feel like you're interrogating the client, so do not do that. You don't want to abruptly interrupt the client and say, well, okay, that's enough about that. Let's move on to this now. Instead, wait for a pause. And some clients it's going to be hard to get a word in edgewise, and when they're telling their story, it's hard to stop. So that is a skill about figuring out how to transition as you need to. Pitfall number 4, inappropriate and irrelevant questions. They should not be based on your curiosity. So while you're asking all the litany of questions, make sure that you are not asking anything that you don't need to know. If your client has some unusual behaviors or practices, as you will find in the case, if they're not relevant to their problem and what they need help with, you don't need to ask those questions. So some of the questions that can be problematic are those that are leading or suggestive. That's from the legal realm. Those of you like legal eagle stuff. Assuming questions, controlling or intrusive or invasive questions, tangential questions, which means ones that really aren't terribly relevant, and pseudo questions, where if you're kind of making a statement but phrasing it in the form of a question, probably want to avoid those as well. Problematic questions can be those that are judgmental, attacking, stacking questions, or shotgun. I'll give an example. My mother used to, in growing up, she did double-blind statements where and this is the stacking or shotgun approach. I would come home from college and would want to go see my friend, and she'd say, fine, go see your friend. I'll just be here. So verbal issue is giving me permission, but the nonverbal was saying that's not what you should be doing. So you don't want to stack your questions where you're one question on top of another without giving the client a chance to respond, or shotgun at rapid fire. And pitfall number 5 for this tape, we'll wrap up, is judgmental responses. Again, this is the difference between using the skill of confrontation and sounding judgmental. So while we talked about in chapter 6 that the skill of confrontation is one that's done gently, tentatively, where you ask it more of a question, that tends less to come across as being judgmental. So pitfall number 5, no judgmental responses. I'll continue on the next video.